right, brothers, welcome to another presentation of the North Carolina Masonic Research Society. I'm glad everyone can make it here. I'm really thrilled to introduce Brother Joe Wages. His Masonic resume, wow, that's impressive. In fact, Joe, I'm going to pull that up and just read a part of it.
Okay.
I thought it was. It's not loading.
He's that guy that's in the Illuminati, right?
Yeah,
That's
right. The guy. You have done quite a bit of research into the Illuminati and written on that. So.
Yeah, well, honestly, like what I'm really going to be known for, though, is I'm going to be the guy that took every major 18th century high degree system, went and got their source rituals and put them into print, so that way it can be studied. But that's really what I'm going for. But Illuminati was Salvo 1.
Well, Joe, I apologize. It's not loading for me. I'm just getting a little spinning
Don't even worry about it.
So let's do this. You are involved in so many organizations, lodges, Scottish Rite, you name it. So why don't you give yourself a little introduction so the brothers knows a little more about you.
Well, hey, everyone. Brother Joe here. Everybody knows, I guess, who I am. Yeah, so basically, I like research quite a bit. I'm not the kind of guy you want leading much of anything. It's not really my forte. My forte is research and doing research. And basically, I'll never lead any organization on purpose because that's not really what my strong suit is, but I kind of got in where I fit in. So I'm in like countless lodges of research. Mainly I focus on 18th century manuscripts, particularly the high degrees. That's what really interests me. But this particular presentation we're going to give tonight, we're going to dial it back and we're going to go look back at the symbolic degrees. And really what we'll find is we'll find a kind of the key to the high degrees as we go through it. But you have to understand everything in its correct context. It's something that I think is sorely missing in the English language and in particular English-speaking lodges. Am I good, Matt?
You're good. You're absolutely good. And whenever you're ready, we're all anxious to hear.
Yeah, let's kick it off then. So I'm going to hit the magical share screen button. Tell me what was whiteboard. I think it's that one. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yeah, we can. Hey, Matt, there's a couple people texting to mute everybody else.
Yeah, you might want to do a mute all.
Yeah, participants tab.
Yep, I'm clicking on it and it's not doing anything. There it is. There it is. Got it. Everyone's muted.
And then unmute Joe.
Do we really have to? No. Let's see. Technology is not my friend.
I think I'm good now.
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you.
I can unmute myself apparently. Who knew? Okay, brother. Well, so what we're going to do is let's hold questions till the end, and we can take as long or as little time as you want to kind of unpack some of these things. So for our presentation tonight, we're going to give on the original position of the wardens in English Masonry and its modern versus ancients. And so, like, why would I even write a presentation like this? Well, Brothers De Hoyos and Morris are doing an expanded version of early Masonic catechisms and early Masonic periodicals, and they're going to make a big masterpiece for AQC, and they're redoing it. But it's not just simply a retypesetting; it's a total expansion of the scope of that book. And so what they've done is they've taken other additional texts and kind of gone through there and beefed up the whole thing. And so what we can see is we can see really in one set of books. I'm not sure if it prints in one volume or two, whichever the case. You can see the entire like outlay of Masonic history. And so what they brought me in for was my specialty are manuscripts and handwriting. That's really what I'm kind of an expert at, especially 18th century stuff. And come to find out, I can read 17th century English too. Who knew? But well, what ended up happening was I ended up checking these transcriptions, and as I was going through them, I started seeing a common theme here, and it's something I'd never considered before. And if we'll think and reflect about like what does Freemasonry look like as they practice it in Europe and pretty much everywhere else in the English-speaking world, or not in the English-speaking world, I should say, it looks quite a bit different. You've got both wardens in the West, you've got tracing boards, you've got swords, and the words are quite a bit different, right? So what we're going to go into as we dive into this presentation is we're going to realize is that the original Freemasonry looks exactly like what they practiced in Europe in the very beginning, even going back to operative lodges, right? So it's not just the modern changed some things. It goes back to when they're operative stonemasons. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at each text. We're going to kind of go through it, and I've just picked out a couple like little keywords here, and we're going to kind of work our way through it. So that being said, I think we're at a good point to go ahead and begin. All right, so this text is really interesting to me because this is what they call a narrative of the Freemasons' words and signs, and it's dated 1659 in the archives of the Royal Society. Important thing to note about this manuscript is it's not dated 1659. What it is, and what I think it is personally, is an early member of the Premier Grand Lodge is consolidating all three Sloan manuscripts. And so one of the Sloan manuscripts is dated 1659, even though the paper says it's 1700 something. It just means it's a copy, right? And so what this manuscript is, it's a composite, and I believe personally that a lot of the composite stuff in this Royal Society manuscript actually makes its way over into Anderson's constitutions. And so what you're seeing is the early Premier Grand Lodge is consolidating all the extant narratives and trying to put it into a comprehensive text, and they end up extracting a lot of information out of this and using it in Anderson's constitution in 1723 and then later revised in 1738. Okay, so let's go ahead and just dive right into it. And so remember, this is from the Sloan manuscript, and in particular, this version of the Sloan in this section says 1648. So what we're seeing basically is that even though it's a later copy, it's probably an early 18th century copy, it's a copy of a 17th century text. And so the only important part here that really matters is it says, which is ye master's place in the lodge? And the answer is the east place is the master's place in the lodge, and the jewel resteth on him first, and he setteth men to work. And here's the important line, though. It says, what the masters have in the forenoon, the wardens reap in the afternoon. So if we think about it, the way our lodges are set up, the east is the morning, right? And the west is the afternoon, the setting sun. So from the rising to the setting sun, right? So what he's saying is, and this is, again, 1659 is what it says. It's the particular section is 1648, and it's copied in the early 19th century, early 18th century. And it says, what the masters have in the forenoon, the wardens, plural, reap in the afternoon. So what they're saying is the masters in the east and both wardens are in the west. And that's a feature that's typical of modern Freemasonry in Europe, continental Freemasonry, so to speak. And the reason is because it comes from the Premier Grand Lodge. That's why they're doing modern masonry, because it is masonry that, whether directly or indirectly, is derived from modern's ritual from the Premier Grand Lodge. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip ahead here real quick. The next manuscript that pops up is the Edinburgh Register House manuscript, right? And the important thing about this one too is the handwriting's a little bit irregular, and they're like I found in all these different manuscripts I transcribed or check the transcriptions on, there's a bunch of errors, and it's not anyone's fault. It's just it was never really properly done and looked at. It doesn't change meaning, but it's like punctuational type things, but it still does matter, because if you're doing an academic study of something, you want to have the kind of rigor to support really the conclusions and stuff you're making. And if someone goes to check these manuscripts, if there's no rigor there, like if no one put in the effort to correctly transcribe it, it kind of makes it a weak spot, right? And so that's all I did, was go through all these manuscripts and fix all the transcription work on it. Okay, so the question 11 in Edinburgh Register House is, are there any lights in your lodge? And the answer is yes. 3, northeast, southwest, and the eastern passage. All it means is directly due east. So if you think about, like, and they're talking about the candles, right, that are in the lodge room, and that's the important connection here. So they're conflating the position of the lights with the position of the people in the lodge room. So it says 3, northeast, southwest, and the eastern passage. The one denotes the master mason, the other the warden, which is singular. Kind of odd, but if you look at the way the handwriting works on this one, it probably was intended to be plural. It just got dropped. And it says the third, the setter croft, or the fellow craft, right? And so all they're saying is that there's a master wardens in the west, And then like the senior fellow craft, like the basically the oldest fellow craft, he's kicking it over there in the south, is all they're saying. Okay, next one that pops up is the Chetwood Crawley manuscript. In fact, I think if I can do it, this probably works better. Does this work better, or can you see you guys in the screen?
Much better, thank you.
Is this better? Okay, good. Okay, so Chetwood Crawley manuscript is 1700, thereabouts. And again, it's same question, question 11. And what you'll see is Chetwood Crawley, Kevin manuscript, Edinburgh Register House, and there's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but they're all four of the same lineage, right? They're all Scottish rituals. And so what we're looking at in these manuscripts is you're looking at an operative Scottish ritual pre-Grand Lodge. And it's the same questions again. Are there any lights in your lodge? And the answer is 3, the northeast, the southwest, and the eastern passage. And it says the one denotes the master mason, the other, the wardens, and this one's plural, which is another reason why you know that was probably a mistake in Edinburgh Register House, and the third, the fellow craft, right? And so we're just seeing affirmation of the same thing repeated in a copy. And so maybe now's a good time to state the point that it turns out that really there are standardizations of rituals. There clearly is a standard format. We have no less than 4 manuscripts in operative times. And what it's saying is that the ritual, a lot of people have said that it's, oh, well, there's no standard form of ritual. And if you think about it long and hard for a second, does that really make sense that they would have a standard constitution, standard procedures for opening and closing lodges, chartering new lodges, but then they leave the ritual, the whole reason for being for the fraternity, for nothing, just to make it up as you go along? We're cool. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so it's one of the things that a lot of this research and checking these manuscripts has really kind of fleshed out for me, is that even in operative masonry, they have standardized forms of rituals. So we shouldn't be too quick just because we have few examples to copy from or to study to say that there is no standardized form of ritual. I think that's a very, very serious misunderstanding. And, I think it's something that as time goes on, maybe more manuscripts get discovered, and even if it doesn't, that's fine. We need to be working from the point that if everything else is standardized, it stands to reason that these rituals are standardized, and we can see it right here in operatives ritual, and by extension, it makes sense that modern masonry or speculative ritual is going to be the same thing. It's going to be a standardized form. Okay. We're going to skip ahead now to the Sloan manuscript, and if you remember, this is the one that was reported, or that is recorded in the Royal Society manuscript. So we're going to see almost an exact duplication here, and this one's roughly dated to about 1700. And it says, which is the master's place in the lodge? The east place is the master's place in the lodge, and the jewel resteth on him first, and he setteth men to work. With what the masters have in the forenoon, the wardens reap in the afternoon. So it's a repeating of the same thing, and we've seen it now in 3 manuscripts in a row that they're following the standardized form. Okay. Next one that pops up in the series is the Airlie manuscript, and it's 1705. Now, instead of being question 11 in this one, it's question 10, and it's saying, are there any lights in your lodge? And the answer is yes. 3, the north, east, southwest, and passage. One denotes the master mason, the warden, the other the warden, and the third the fellow craft. And so it's not just a singular fellow craft, but fellow craft like plural, right? So all it's telling you is that in the lodge room, the master's place is in the east, both wardens' places are in the west, and the fellow craft are supposed to be the ones hanging out in the south. And by extension, Brother Parker, who's going to be hanging out in the north?
Who's going to be hanging out in the north?
Yeah, if you got the master in the east, the wardens in the west, and the fellow crafts in the south, who's hanging out in the north, the place of darkness?
Oh, I didn't know this was going to be a pop quiz.
Quiz.
Is it, would it be a deacon?
No, they may or may not be the first degree.
Be the EAs?
It's the EAs, that's exactly right. Entered apprentices hang out in the north, the place of Masonic darkness.
My lodge actually taught me stuff.
Look at that. See, it wasn't for nothing.
I'm terribly sorry to interject, but the middle middle chamber just recently taught us that the EAs hang out in the northeast, halfway between the two, between darkness and light.
Right, and we'll touch on that here in a second, Dave. And what we're talking about is the difference between modern masonry versus ancient masonry. So kind of like a general proviso, modern masonry, it's basically, it's operative to masonry, slightly modified and fortified with a new ceremony for the existing custom of making master masons or masters of the lodges, except for now we can do it to everyone. I'm saying all that because where the entered apprentice is placed is in the northeast. That's from ancient ritual, and that's where all that kind of stuff comes from. And so what we're talking about here is stuff that's like, that's 1751 and later. And so this stuff, it all precedes that stuff. So you are correct. That is the place for entered apprentices, right? Or at least a newly made entered apprentice would be in the northeast place in the lodge, right? But in this particular instance, this supersedes it because it's older. That's all I'm saying. Okay. That being said, let's pop on over to the Airlie manuscript, 1705. And again, this one, instead of being question 11, is question 10. And then again, it's another example of Edinburgh Register House's form. And so it says, is there any lights in your lodge? Yes. 3, the northeast, southwest, and eastern passage. And it says the one denotes the master mason, the other the warden, and the third the fellow craft. So again, it's the same thing. And so what we're seeing is consistency here all the way from like the 1640s up until about 1705. Oh wait, there's more. Okay, we got the Dumfries manuscript, which is roughly about 1710. And in that manuscript, it asks, how many lights are in your lodge? And the answer is 3. What is meant of the 3? The answer is the master, the fellow craftsmen, and the wardens. It says, which way stand the lights? It says there's one in the east and one in the west and one in the middle, which means the eastern passage in the south, right? And so you're thinking about these lodge light positions. Even in masonry today, they vary quite a bit. So what we're seeing is even early on variability in the placement of the lights. And it says, well, what is the one in the east? It's for the master, and the west is for the fellow craftsman, and the middle is for the warden. But what it is he's conflated it, right? So what it's supposed to be is the west is for the wardens, and the middle is for the fellow craftsmen, right? So in the south. And so what we're seeing is conflation here in a copying mistake. But what's funny though is this same copying mistake, you're going to see this get repeated in later manuscripts that are copies of the same thing. So here's that Kevin manuscript I mentioned to you. They say 1714 is what they're dating it at. I think it had actually, if you look at where it falls in before Dumfries. So it's probably 1700, and Dumfries is 1705, 1710. And I think I just went the wrong direction. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so in the Kevin manuscript, in question 11, it kind of follows Edinburgh Register House. That's one of the reasons why I think it follows that earlier form. It may be 1700 because it's question 11, yet we saw examples where it was question 10. So we're seeing changing in the text and renumbering, which isn't a copying mistake, it's a reorganizing. In any case, so question 11, are there lights in your lodge? And the answer is 3, the northeast, southwest, and eastern passages. It says the first denotes the master mason, the second the wardens, and the third the fellow craft. Same thing we're seeing again here. So we're seeing all the way back into the 1640s in operative masonry, both wardens are in the west here. And we keep going, okay? This is a printed text. It says the grand mystery of Freemasons discovered in 1724. So this is pre-emergence of the Master Mason degree by about a year, thereabouts. It may already be in existence at this point, but it's just not showing up in print. And so it asks, where is the warden's point? And it says, at the west window, waiting the setting of the sun to dismiss the entered apprentices, right? I mean, it can't be more clear than that. So we're going to pop on over. And this is where you start seeing in all these different ritual texts, you start seeing a big change in the text as far as the way they're organized and wording, right? So somewhere around 1724 and all extant copies of rituals that we have, and there could be more out there, but just for what we have, there's a shift right about 1724. Okay, and so in keeping with the spirit of that shift, we're going to look at the Institution of Freemasons right about 1725. So all the way down in question 19, it's asking where's the warden's post, not point, but post, and it says at the west window, waiting the setting of the sun to dismiss the entered apprentice. Okay. And then we come along a couple years later here in 1727, we've got the Wilkinson manuscript. And it says in question 29, where does the warden stand? It says answer in the west. Warden's in the west. Okay. And then we could pop on over same year, 1727, in a printed text of Mason's Confession. It says, how many lights are there in your lodge? And the answer is 3. What are these 3? Southeast, south, and southwest. And so what we're seeing is that southwest thing, it's being conflated. It was supposed to say, I think it's supposed to say northwest in the other text, but my memory's a little fuzzy there. In any case, it's a mistake is the reason why I highlighted it. Okay, then we get to good old-fashioned Pritchard's Masonry Dissected, 1730. Now this one kind of puts in the baseline for ritual. And what's funny is, I don't think it's really an official Grand Lodge ritual, but it got put into print, and more or less because it was printed, it was used abroad, not only in France, but in Germany and several different places too, for them to erect lodges. And a lot of these lodges were set up without the authority of the Grand Lodge of England, and later they kind of worked through the back channels and became regularized, so to speak. Many of them didn't. And so it's kind of a grab bag. But what Pritchard's Masonry Dissected does is it basically runs through 8 editions, like in a few weeks, and even like 2 pirate copies, if I remember correctly. And so basically, Pritchard's Masonry Dissected is the baseline for basically starting up 18th century Masonic ritual, not just in England, but it can be used all throughout Europe, and it was used that way. Okay, now referencing Pritchard's Masonry Dissected, it asks, where stands your warden? And the answer is in the west. There's my little boy over there. And that's what's going on here, is that we're seeing more of the same thing here. And in fact, they're really, the moderns, even though I have to say it this way, but there's an existing ceremony for Master Mason that's used for incoming masters of lodges. All that Desigoulier probably really does is make a formal ceremony from it. And even there's heramical components that are in like old charges and things that predate even the premier Grand Lodge. My contention, although it's just a hypothesis at this point, I don't think that we can really ever solidly prove it unless we get like the smoking confession letter, is that he took an existing system, modified it, tried to keep to the original as best he could, and then ultimately ended up changing, and then the Antients come along, and then we end up in the form of ritual we're at today, many jumps later. That said, though, let's go ahead and continue. And so now we're looking at the mystery and motions of Freemasonry, 1730. And this one's funny because it says, that the master's place is in the west, the warden's the east, and the fellows the eastern passage. Well, what they did was they inverted the masters and the wardens, and it looks like, to me, it looks like a drop, like it's purposely done that way. So if someone's trying to, who's not a Mason, to gain admission, that he gets it wrong, basically. That's what I think, and it could be just a stupid mistake. It's kind of hard to say, but like if you look at it, I mean, it says the master's place is in the west, the warden's in the east. If you just look at the way that it's put in there and everything else in that book jives, it would be one of those things where, like, if a guy read the catechisms, memorized it, tried to turn out the lodge, turning in the catechism, and he's not going to be getting into lodge because the masters are, in fact, not in the west. And so I think it's intentional, is what it looks like to me. Right? And so I don't know why I did the bottom part there, but we'll skip it. So, where was I? Okay, so then we see the same mistake, though. It gets repeated in the Mysteries of Freemasonry, 1730, right? And it says the same thing again, that the master's place is in the east, the warden's the east, and the fellow crafts the eastern passage. So it looks like they fixed the first one, but the second one should have been west, and they left it alone. So maybe they corrected one mistake here and let the other one slide, or they intentionally let it slide. It's really hard to say, but it should say west there. Okay, and so here we look at Benjamin Franklin's first Masonic publication in the United States, Mystery of Freemasonry, and he puts it in the Pennsylvania Gazette, right? What's cool about it, though, is that Franklin, he repeats the same mistake. And so what we see is that now 3 manuscripts or printed text in a row are using identical language, right? And so think about it, like if you're a printer, you're in colonial America and you're trying to make a buck, and we already know this text is popular, does it make sense to write new stuff, or does it make sense to take popular text and retypeset them and print them out for distribution, right? Because when Masonry dissected over there in England, they ended up getting, and most of the people probably buying it weren't just regular people, but probably Masons buying it for, kind of reinforcing their work. And it's probably the same situation here that I can see as well. So getting past it, we see yet again another repetition. So this is the fourth one in a row, and it's in the Puerile Signs and Wonders of a Freemason, 1730. And it says again, the wardens are supposed to be hanging out in the east, even though they're supposed to be in the west. And so it just shows more proof that it was copied from the Mysteries of Freemasonry, along with two other texts from the source. And we're starting to see repetition here, but also what you're seeing here too is standardization, even in these texts. So now we've seen examples of standardization in operatives ritual, and also standardization in printed text. Now, can you call them rituals? I don't know. I have a funny thought about this. I think that, like in English Masonry, really the way of recording ritual was in that catechismal form. Because think about it, if you're already familiar with the ceremonies and everything else, maybe you bungle some words in the catechism, and that's, maybe made a few mistakes. You need like an aid to memory, right? So if you look at, you're trying to start up a lodge, are you going to have a big long ritual, or are you going to have just like the parts, because you already know the motions, you've been to lodge, you know how the lodge is open, closed, how to conduct the ceremonies, but maybe you miss a word or two. And that's why a lot of these early texts, as far as like English Masonry go, people say, oh, well, there's no really any early rituals at all we have is catechisms. But if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because it's suitable for people already familiar with the system. It begs the question then, well, why is it that the French rituals are so much more explicit, and the stuff they use in continental Europe, why is it spelled out that way? It's probably tradition, but it also has to do with technical issues. And my thought is that if you take a country like France, right, like, and say it's like 1725, you're trying to bring your first lodge into Paris. These guys have no experience with any kind of Masonic system at all, and so they have to spell it out super explicit in detail in their native language. And so that's what it is that's why these French rituals are so much more explicit than the English ones, because there's no working memory of it. You're literally starting from zero. And because you're starting from zero, it has to be more explicit. And because it's more explicit, then remember the tradition thing comes into play. Well, if the original starts out this way, then the rest of them go this way too. And so what it is just because it had to be explicit to start it there, it becomes a thing where it becomes a necessity and a tradition for here's what the structure of Masonic ritual looks like. And so sorry to take that little sidestep there, but that's kind of what my thought is as far as like English Masonry and using catechisms versus full explicit rituals in France, Germany, and places like this. And it's the technical reason. That said, let's go ahead and skip on over to Masonry Farther Dissected, 1738. And they're asking him, where's their place in the lodge? And it says, the masters is in the east, the two wardens in the west, the fellow craft in the south, and the entered apprentices in the north, already clothed, meaning they're wearing their aprons and their gloves, right? This is 1738. And then we pop on over to this manuscript called the Chesham manuscript, which is awesome because it was originally this really long scroll and ended up separating it into 7 different little pieces, made like little strategic cuts where they're all roughly about the same size. And so what this one is it's super explicit. It's EA all the way through Master Mason. They think 1740, but I see textual clues in there that tell me 1730s. But either way, I mean, we're talking the difference of like, what, 5 years? So it's a moot point at this point. But what's weird about it, though, is that it says the wardens are supposed to be in the east, too. And so what it allows you to see here is that the Chesham manuscript really isn't an original ritual at all. It's a person that sat down who probably was a Mason and copied out one of those other 4 texts. And in fact, if you look at it line for line, that's exactly what it is. And that's why you see the same repetition of the mistake where it says the master's place is in the east and the warden's in the east and the fellows the eastern passage. And then also in the same text, it says where stands your wardens in the west. So clearly they got it right there for the reason that it was right in the text that they copied it from. And so really what the Chesham manuscript is It's a personal member's copy that he used one of the printed text to get there. And that's ultimately what this text is. Okay, but here's my favorite one though, and this one is dialogue between Simon and Philip, and so it's a question and answer catechismal thing, but it's got some really interesting points we're going to see in a second here. Philip's over asking, and he's saying, "Where stood the wardens?" And Simon says, "In the west." Why in the west? To wait the setting of the sun and to discharge the men from their labor. So it's no longer just entered apprentices, it's just the men in general, right? You're seeing a little like slight evolution of text, but general holding of the same themes is what we're seeing here as things go along. And mind you, too, that 1751 is when the Ancients start up. So all these rituals prior to that, including the Ancients rituals, are based on modern rituals deliberately augmented. And we'll go into that here in a minute. Okay, but this is the interesting part that I had mentioned before. And so what it's showing you here is what was the form of the lodge back in operatives' times. And so it's saying that the master has a pedestal, and they call it that, not an altar, but a pedestal in the East, and it's still in the East actually in English Masonry today. And then you see the two wardens that are both in the West there at the South. You got a fellow craft on this, or sorry, the two wardens in the West. You got a fellow craft in the South, and an entered apprentice in the North. And you see the candles, which look kind of odd, right? But think back to some of the early ritual stuff where it talks about that he knows the diamond and this, that, and the other, and that's what it's talking about. So the G in the middle of the lodge was a diamond shape. So when it talks in the catechismal questions, it's talking about that they know the diamond. That's what they're talking about, is this G and the diamond in the middle. And so this is one illustration that's in there, but it gets even crazier. So if we look in the same text, a page later, it says this is the new lodge under Desaguliers regulation, right? And so what we're doing is we're getting hints that Desaguliers has revised the system. And so if we go back one, we can see that it's rather cross-like, and we don't know if it's actually a cross is chalked out on the floor or if it's symbolic or what have you. We're not certain of that. But what we do know is where the people are supposed to stand, where the lights are supposed to be, and that there's a G and a diamond in the floor. And it could be that it was a cross. I just don't know, to be honest. And so what we see then is in the lodges under Desaguliers regulation, you see the candles in the same form, the master is in the same place, the wardens are in the same place, but we've gone now from one fellow craft and one entered apprentice to two fellow crafts and two entered apprentices. And then you see the working tools that have been added in the lodge. One of the big beefs that Dermot had with the moderns in his book, Mon Raison, was like he's clowning them basically that, oh, they're using tin and this, that, and the other in the floors and blah, 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 blah. And you're thinking to yourself, what is he even talking about? He's talking about this. And so these letters are actually cut out of tin in about the 1750s. And they're using like either metal tape or just some kind of like fabric tape and like taping the four corners of the lodge here. And so what it is, it's like they're basically trying to speed up the process for opening a lodge. And keep in mind, these guys aren't meeting in lodge buildings like we meet in. They meet in taverns and places. So it's kind of like guerrilla lodge work. And so you're setting up like in a tavern or someplace. So you've got a brother who's pretty good at drawing, but he still, before they do the ritual, has to chalk the floor. And so the reason tracing boards, or even earlier, like using the pieces of cutout tin of the working tools and the cardinal directions, it's a means of it's an innovation maybe, but what it really is it's an improvement. It's a time saver. So they're not breaking any tradition. They're just trying to get this lodge open faster instead of relying on some guy that may or may not come to the lodge who can draw and drawing the stuff on the floor, right? It's just it's speed of setup is all it is, and that's really probably the whole reason tracing boards come into existence anyways, is because what they're trying to do is allow for a speedy setup of a lodge to keep moving, right? But in the same manuscript of dialogue between Simon and Philip, there's yet another one. But before we skip to it, I want you to read this little note right here in the bottom. It says, "Note bene," or note well, "this circle in holy flame is added when masters are taken up." And so what we're seeing is this is probably right around 1725 that this Simon and Philip is copied from an earlier text. And so back then, instead of having like a coffin on the tracing board like you use in modern ritual today, at that point in time, when one became a master mason, all they were really doing was putting a G with a radiant fire around it, and it becomes a blazing star later on. But it's the early origin of this symbol, and so it goes right back to the beginning of master mason before the ritual, starts evolving a little bit over time. But this text is copied 1740. Okay, so moving along to that other image I referenced, we're going to see that, again, this is starting to look really, really familiar to those French tracing boards. We're starting to see a little bit of growth here. They've got the moon kind of cockeyed in the corner down there in the northwest corner. Ultimately, he ends up making it to the northeast corner in a lot of the French tracing boards, but we're still seeing the working tools. And so it says this is for the lodge opening and shutting in the bottom right there. So they're showing you where the door is to enter the lodge. There's no pillars or anything like that at this point in time. Maybe they've got pillars they've got in the building. Maybe they're just drawing them on the floor. We don't know. I've got an idea about it, but we just don't know for certain. And so what they're saying is that the compasses, the Bible, and the constitutions are both on a pedestal or stool covered with white linen. And so what you're seeing here is if we saw this setup, and this configuration is how it's set up for the Master Mason's ritual for entered apprentice and fellow craft, this is the setup and the configuration. So Master versus entered apprentice fellow craft. And the reason why I'm combining them is in European tracing boards today, the entered apprentice and fellow craft tracing board are almost identical, except for they put the J on the column and they put the G and the blazing star in the middle. Is the difference between the two, and the lectures are only slightly expanded. And there's historical precedents for this too. If you read the minute book from Langlais, 204 in Bordeaux, in 1732, it's founded by the Premier Grand Lodge. And in this, in the founding of this lodge, you read the minute book, and they're being compared entered apprentice and fellow craft right at the same time. If you look at these early rituals, it makes a lot of sense because there's really not more teaching involved. And so what it would be is the candidate comes in as an entered apprentice, he does his little thing around the lodge, takes his obligation, maybe given a little bit of instruction, sent back to the room to change, put his apron on and get his stuff back. And when he comes back into the lodge room, he receives the fellow craft degree. And then Langlais 204, from 1732 to 1744, the midgets in this book are conducted in English because it's an English lodge founded by Irish guys hanging out in Bordeaux. And then in 1744, it switches to French. In the early, it's like the second or the third meeting, it talks about the apprentice fellows degree. And that's what they're talking about, is that they were using entered apprentice and fellow craft. They were running them side by side. And if you look at like the operative rituals, like what gets taken out of fellow craft and put into the Master Mason's ritual, chiefly the 5 points of fellowship and things like this, and then the grip moves with it too. What you end up seeing is that this thing, it's evolving over time, but even in the beginning, the reason why entered apprentice and fellow craft are kind of lumped together is because fellow craft had some things removed off of it to fortify the master's degree along with the heraldic legend. And so that's why early, like maybe from, 1725 to maybe like 1740s, 1750s, it's running in this form where entered apprentice and fellow can happen the same night. They don't have to, but they can. That's the only difference. Okay. So what's interesting though is we think today that tracing boards really are kind of like a French innovation. Really, they come from all of, from continental Europe, somewhere in that thing. What I'm about to show you is that, in fact, there's precedents for it in England as early as 1742. And yes, I know it says 1472. Christopher Columbus was not a Mason, and this is 1724. But that being said, so in the Westminster Journal, what you're seeing is that they had a St. John's Day procession. There's 3 different engravings of it. This one's particularly interesting because you see down here like there's these Masons on procession. So what I've done is I've gone in there and kind of highlighted it and then done a little playing with the contrast on it. And what we start seeing in there, look right there in the top right, you're looking at 2 columns, the moon, the sun, the compasses, the level, the line, a G with a blazing, or holy flame or whatever you want to call it, blazing star in the middle. And then over there in the back left, this thing on a cart that looks like a box, and it's got an M and a B on it. And so what we're seeing is by 1742, that process of adding that holy flame or whatever around the G has kind of gone out. And in fact, for master's degrees, maybe they're incorporating coffins into it. I mean, can we definitively say it's a coffin? I don't know. But what I do see is 2 columns right there they're carrying in procession. I see their tracing board for Inter Apprentice Fellowcraft, and I see a thing on a cart with 2 letters, M and a B. It's unmistakable. You can't mistake what it is. And then we look at the tradition today, like in Continental Masonry, that again, that they're using a coffin in the master's board. And what does it say? What it's showing you is that these ideas don't come from Europe. These ideas came from England and were exported to Europe. And it's that our rituals have changed. For good or better, for better, for worse, we can't really say. I've got my opinion, but we can't say for certain. And so what we see, though, is that traditions have been lost, and that is a fact. And there's no way around it. So the question then becomes well, when does the junior warden get moved to the South? I mean, all of Masonry that everyone on this call has been in the U.S., the junior warden's always in the South, right? Well, when does this happen? And the answer is the founding of the Ancients or Athol Grand Lodge in 1751. And so the backstory on it is that the Grand Lodge of Ireland is probably founded by the Grand Lodge of England. It's reported in their local thing, and that's the only reason we even know they were formed in 1727. And it's also reported same time in the Postboy, which was read by Masons in London, kind of announcing what had taken place there. So to a larger extent, maybe the Grand Lodge of Ireland, seeing as how Ireland is dependent upon England, right, politically and governmentally, same story with the Grand Lodge itself. So maybe they kind of get kickstarted, but they become their own entity. The point is that the guys that formed the Ancients Grand Lodge, they basically in 1751, they'd moved over like in the 1740s. They were kind of denied admission into English lodges. And because the deal was they were afraid these Irish guys are going to bankrupt our charity system. And because they were afraid of all this, they wouldn't allow them to join their lodges. And so they kind of got ticked off. I mean, there's no way around it. And so it was forming their own lodges. And the thing is, they formed them without warrant or charter. And some people say, well, there's no precedent for that. But if you read Anderson's Constitution, both in 1723 and in 1738, it doesn't change. It doesn't use the term territorial jurisdiction. But let's not be lawyers about this. Let's look at it for facts, right? If Oklahoma came into Texas and decided to open up a lodge under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, the Grand Lodge of Texas would be pissed for the same reason that the Premier Grand Lodge was pissed that the Irish Masons opened up their own lodge. Well, the thing is, if you're starting something from new, do you start from scratch or do you start from something that's known? Well, people, it's romantic to think that people can create like in a vacuum, like their ideas come from nowhere, but that's not really true because people create on what they've experienced. And what we see even in Three Distinct Knocks, which is a 1760 expose of the Ancients' work, what we see in this book is that really they didn't invent a whole lot. They changed some things. And so if you look at the language in the catechisms, it's different. But if you look at the structural stuff, the landmarks of Masonry, and they claim too that it goes back to an older system. Well, where's this system? Did you guys see, and these are all the extant texts, did you ever see the warden in the South at all? I saw the fellow crafts in the South, but it's fellow crafts plural, not the warden, right? And so that's what's going on here is it's a deliberate change, right? So if you look in the 1758 Ahimon Razon, he joked around, he's like saying, well, can moderns Masons or can Ancients Masons go to moderns lodges? Absolutely. Can moderns Masons make it into Ancients lodges? Absolutely not. Why? Well, because he changed the ritual. He put the junior warden in the South, changed up the ceremonies. And his big gripe about what they were doing was instead of chalking the floor, they were using pieces of tin and tape. And later that evolves into tracing boards, right? And that's his big gripe about it. But what's funny is early on, the Ancients are doing the same thing with chalk, I guess, initially. But then there's exposés that are printed where they're doing the exact same deal. They're using tin, like red, like they're using like tin and like red tape to mark out the lodge. So really, they're no different at all. And it's just kind of funny. Because the very thing that he condemns the moderns for, it come to find out that the Ancients And it's a convenience, right? Do you want to sit and chalk this lodge room floor all day long, or do you want to unroll this carpet and let's get onto it, or do you want to nail down these pieces of tin and tape real quick? And that's what's going on. And so, you know, that little harangue aside, like that's what happens is the rituals change in 1751. It's deliberate, and the technical reason for it is they've started a new Grand Lodge without warrant or jurisdiction. You know, you can make the argument they've invaded the territorial jurisdiction of the Premier Grand Lodge, even though there's no such concept then. But effectively, that's what they've done. And the reason they've had to change this ritual is to exclude the members from the jurisdiction of the ritual they just copied and pirated and formed lodges without warrant or constitution. And so it's a technical issue to basically keep these guys out of their lodges. That's why they changed this ritual. That's what goes on here. So let's take a look at three distinct knocks, or the door of most ancient Freemasonry, 1760. We start to see something interesting. We see the candles moving around. The candles are actually almost in the right places if you look at Edinburgh Register House, but you see the junior warden's place in the south, right? And then you see the senior warden is in the west. The junior deacon is sitting where the senior warden normally would have sat, and the senior warden sitting where the junior warden normally would have sat, but he's in the west, the junior warden's in the south. And that's all we're seeing here, is that it's a deliberate and intentional changing of the ritual to be unique and different, to make themselves different from what they came out of. That's all we're seeing here. Okay, and so now I want you to take a look at these guys real quick. And so this comes from 1745, and they're printed, I forget which one it is, but it's a famous English exposure. And so on the left is the Entered Apprentice Fellows board, right? So all that changes here is that the J gets added to the column, and the G gets added to the blazing star. It's literally the only thing that changes in these tracing boards for Entered Apprentice Fellow craft. So as he's out in the lodge room, you know, redressing to come back in the lodge, they throw this J down and they add a G, right? That's about it. Then on the right here, we see the master's board, and we see the outline of a coffin, basically, and these little footsteps here, and it's showing you like how to step across, how to make the master's steps. If you look at our ritual today, right, we've got an entered apprentice step, a fellow craft step, and a master's step. Those are artifacts. Those are artifacts left over from the original modern ritual, because if you go back and read the Secret School of Wisdom, right, that thing is copied off the 1742 Zoroastrian ritual, is what the Illuminati built their symbolic craft degrees on. So if you want to know what English Masonry looked like in the 1740s, with the exception of very, very few changes, that's it. So it's an Easter egg. It's in the book. It's what they copied their system off of, because they made an entire Masonic system in 16 days and also wanted to be seen as reformers. And so what they did was they went back to the original rituals from the Grand Lodge of England in the 1740s, and they put this thing out there. And so that artifact is these steps across the board that we're seeing here, is that what we have today, what we call our entered apprentice, our fellows, and our master step, it's an artifact because they physically were actually stepping across this board in a certain pattern, right? That's all that you really need to keep in mind here. So that being said, if you go back in time and you look at all of the printed things, and so this is a 1760s reprint of a thing that was done in the 1745 in Leipzig, and Johann Martin Berengerot was the guy's name, and he engraved these things, and he took on his dad's name as an engraver. But if we go back just a couple slides, so look at the entered apprentice board. There's the entered apprentice board, and we'll skip over to this master's one. See that master's board? There's, and so what we're seeing is continuity here, and it's the same thing. And so what it's describing is the ceremonies, right? So if we look at the entered apprentice thing, is so basically the candidate has just come in this deal. He hasn't made any circumambulations, hasn't come across the lodge. He's just now being brought to the west, and he's being brought there by the junior warden. So remember, kind of like southwest is where the junior warden is, northwest is the junior warden, southwest is the senior warden. And so what you're seeing is in the modern rituals, the wardens do work, right? They don't just sit there and have the deacons do everything. They actually get up and do things in the lodge room. And so basically the junior warden, he'll take candidates and bring them into the lodge, place him between the two wardens on the circumambulations, he'll lead them around, that kind of thing. That's all we need to keep in mind here. So we're seeing lodge and entered apprentice configuration, and he's leading the candidate to the tracing board, right? And so now he's completed his circumambulations. He's in the east, and he's taking the obligation. And so, and it's in all the rituals, even going, if you go all the way back, like it talks about how they take their obligation, right? And so what it is, it's the point of two compasses, and they put it on the breast, hold it there with the left hand, right hand on the Bible. They're kneeling on a square. And so the square and compasses are not on the Bible. The square is on the thing he's actually kneeling on. And he's got the compasses between his breast, takes the obligation. And when he's done, the master takes his gavel and taps 3 times on the head of the compasses, right? And that's how he's obligated. That's all that's to say there. Okay. So now what we're seeing is a master's degree, right? And so the brother is about to be introduced into the lodge. The junior warden is about to make his little departure over here and go grab the candidate. So they're all set up, ready to do this master's degree, carpet on the floor, same people, normally you would see. And so what we're seeing here is now the candidate who's a fellow craft about to be received a master, again, received on the point of the sword. He's going to be turned around backwards so he can't see the tracing board or any of the people around it. He's going to be led around the lodge room backwards 3 times until he reaches the west, and he's popped around. He takes the steps across, gets the Heramic legend, and then he's felled, right? So he gets 3 blows. And on the 3rd blow, they pull him down. He's put onto the tracing board here. And what they end up doing is they lay him down. In this engraving, you can't really tell, but in later text, it says that his right leg is bent. His left hand is in the position of fidelity, left hand on the breast, left hand by his side, left leg normal, and he's covered with a cloth. And some of them, it's just a cloth on the faith. In some of the rituals, it's a shroud all over the whole body. They point the swords at him. And then he's raised. Everything kind of happens here. And so here's what I want to do, a fun little aside thing. So what we established in the last little part of this presentation is that the wardens have always been in the West, and it's the modern to move them in 1751, thereabouts, right? But what I wanted to look at real quick through here is just to kind of get an idea of American Masonic history. What's our true legacy? When did lodges get formed here? When, where, why, and how? And what we'll see here in this little group here is that 39 lodges were chartered under the Premier Grand Lodge that we know of. And there could have been more, but not directly done. It could have been done where, like local lodges by provincial Grand Masters had the power to appoint and constitute new lodges. And so there's 39 that are officially appointed from the Premier Grand Lodge of England itself, and then it can spread out like a spider web. But we're gonna work and focus on only the ones that we can prove that we have documentation for. So one thing I wanted to point out to you right here is to look at, this is an apprentice fellows tracing board, right? And it was used in Union Lodge in Dorchester, Massachusetts in 1796, although this board is older than that, right? Because their Grand Lodge isn't formed until 1787. It's probably a throwback to the 1780s. Let's look at this. We'll keep this tracing board in mind, and we'll come back to it here in a minute. We'll look at other examples of English tracing boards and place them in their proper context, because no one's really realized that modern tracing boards to this day still exist. Just no one knows the context because it's been forgotten, because we don't work this style of ritual in the English-speaking language. And it's like anything. If you fail to do something, you forget to do it, and you forget the memory of it. And so it takes someone going back to put it in its proper context. So that being said, Delaware got a big whopping 0. Pennsylvania ended up getting 2, both in 1758 and in 1761. When we look at Massachusetts, which they include the territory of Maine at this point, you get 5, right? And so, they start out in 1733, 1749, 1760. St. Andrew's Lodge in Boston is chartered as an Athol Lodge, but it's taken over and made a modern lodge during the Revolution in 71. That's what happens. And then they end up actually St. Andrew's Lodge moves to New York. And so then we see African Lodge of Prince Hall fame there in 1784. Let's take a look at New Jersey, 0. Georgia had 3. Savannah Lodge was chartered in 1735, but they were meeting in 1729. We have that in Lane's Masonic records. And so, I mean, Premier Grand Lodge is at 1717, 1721. I don't know. But if it's 1721, 8 years later, we're hanging out in Georgia here. The point is that, you know, it's old, and it's for a reason, and that there's this tradition here. They also have lodges in 1774, 1775. And then we'll switch on over to Connecticut, right? They've got one chartered 1750. Same thing in Maryland, 1765. But back in 1755, they were meeting. Okay, so we've got South Carolina. They get 9 lodges, which is awesome. They've got 1735, 1743, 1755, 1756. 1756, 1761, 1763, 1774, 1786. New Hampshire gets a 0. Virginia gets 4 in 1753. They get a lodge in Yorktown in 1755, 1773 in Williamsburg, and another one in 1773. New York gets 13. We won't really touch on all of them because there's a bunch. But we get 1756, 57, 61, 64, 64, 71. And then here's where it is, like St. Andrew's Lodge, it goes over to New York in 1776, right? And that's all. I'll just point out the connection there. In 1779, they've got another, and then Solomon's Lodge in 1780. Then they've got another one, 1781, another 1781. And these are all military lodges at this point because it's during the Revolution. Then you've got a Provincial Grand Lodge in 1781, 1786, and then 1786. And I think that's going to cover us. Now, for you guys out there in North Carolina, you guys have got 2. You've got Cape Fear River, which is 1755. And if I'm off on this, let me know, please. I'm sure you guys will hear in a little bit. I think this is right, and this is based on Lane's Masonic records. And you've got Royal White Hart Lodge in 1767. And then to kind of bring it home here, we've got Rhode Island's got just 1 lodge, and it's chartered in 1757. So basically, let me see if I can unshare my screen. Does anyone know how to do that? Bueller?
Just up at the top.
Is it this one? What am I doing?
There should be a red X.
It'll say like unshare or something, Joe.
Oh, will it? Sorry. Would help if I knew the technology, but I don't. Oh, pause share. I got it. Okay, am I back on human again? Are you guys still with me?
Yep.
Okay. So let's do one thing real quick here. I want to go back and share my screen one more time. So what you guys are seeing here, there's my presentation. I want to go back to that tracing board and do something fun with it real quick. And so to kind of put things into context, right? So this is supposed to be 1796. In all likelihood, it's early 1780s in Massachusetts. This is my thinking. That's where I'm going with it. But we see 2 columns, the moon, the sun, all-seeing eye, Bible, G and the blazing star, square and compasses put together. It's a tracing board, right? Let's take a look at Pedersen's tracing board books, and this is early, like 1900s. He prints these, right? And so what he's doing is he's showing you in these different variants of tracing boards, right? And so some of these I'm not too certain on. I don't really see where they're going with this one. But then others where it's obvious. Like take a look at the one on the right there. You've got 2 columns, checkered floor, sun, moon, all-seeing eye in the middle, G in the middle, a Bible. I mean, it's pretty explicit. Like if you kick it over, you see the same thing here. So what we're seeing is there's variations of the theme here, and even in like that 1742 Westminster Journal, which is hanging out somewhere there. If you look, maybe if I can zoom in really close on it. Yeah, if you just look at it though, it's got moon, sun, a G, 2 columns. It's got working tools around it, indented border. And then like, so let's kick it back and get us to normal mode here. And then go to this guy. There we go. Okay, yeah, we go to this one. It's the same thing too. You've got indented or tessellated border, moon, sun, Bible, 2 columns. That's it. So what we're seeing here is that the original Freemasonry itself it's loosely the same thing as the operative Masonry with a few changes. Obviously, the invention of the Master's Ceremony, and what we're seeing then is that all of Masonry that we practice today is in fact derived from a group that's clandestinely formed. And you want to make points about it. You're saying to yourself, well, does that make us all clandestine? Well, yes and no. Probably more no, because they merged with the moderns in 1813, right? But what it's saying is that all traditions should be expected. And there's unfortunately a period of history in this country where in the 19th century, in particular in Louisiana, they pretty much just smashed ruthlessly all modern masonry. And there was Grand Orient lodges, quite frankly, that were working there. And it was really un-Masonic the way that they were done. Like when I first learned about a lot of this stuff, it really kind of made me quite angry. I felt like I'd been cheated out of stuff. But the thing is, we can't change what happened in the past. We weren't deceived. We've inherited a system from people that had been deceived. But what we can do going forward, though, is we can take the knowledge of this and realize that really all these forms of Freemasonry are, in fact, legitimate forms of Freemasonry, and that really there should be, because of all this, there should be an avenue at the Grand Lodge level. And these are, again, positions I'm never going to hold, have no interest in holding. But what should be done, in my opinion, is there should be maybe standardized forms of modern ritual that can be ran. So if a lodge wants to run it, great. You know why? Because it's the original Freemasonry, and there's actually precedent for it. That's what should happen. That's in a perfect world, right? Now, what actually happens, I couldn't say, and it's above my pay grade. All I can do is give you guys the information. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it open for questions.
Joe, that is fantastic. Brothers, I'm going to unmute everyone, but if you have any background noise going on, if you wouldn't mind, just mute yourself. And everyone is unmuted, so go for it.
Good job, Joe.
Thanks, guys.
Good job, Joel. I appreciate it very much. My dinner is ready, so I'm going to say ta-ta to you all. Happy to meet. Sorry to part. Happy to meet again, brother. Take care.
Take care, brother.
This is absolutely amazing. Thank you for letting me be in here.
Patty, we're glad to have you.
It's such an honor.
So, Joe, my mother lodge does an emulation of the Dutch ritual every couple of years because a large number of our members are originally from Holland. So it's set up.
Somebody
that way
has some horrible background noise going.
Sounds like a TV, maybe.
Yeah, you might want to mute yourself if that's you.
We got it. Go ahead.
The masters in the east and both the wardens are in the west for that. It's set up in a triangle pattern.
Yep.
As well as when I was in Switzerland, the lodge, well, I attended a French lodge there, and that's how they're set up, is exactly that same format.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's like I was saying before, everyone in the world runs their ritual the way it was originally ran, but it's because the ancients gained primacy over the moderns, and ultimately they merged and they kept loosely the ancients ritual. And then, Preston Webb and all those guys come along, and it changes further, right? And so we can't undo the changes. It's already part of our history, it's our legacy, but what we can do is allow provisions for the original Freemasonry to work without prejudice, because honestly, if we were going to hold like a view that it's not Masonry, no, it's actually more Masonic than what we're working. That's the crazy part about it. But it doesn't really matter, because it should be that all forms of Freemasonry, and that really it should be the choice of the lodge, not a grand lodge, but a lodge. And that's a radical thought, maybe, but maybe it's something that needs to happen, because at the end of the day, the lodge is the acceptable. Am I muted? No.
Yeah, the noise is coming from the telephone 6623.
Did you find it?
Thanks, Hal. I was looking for that one to try to mute
I
that
can see it lighting up here when it does that.
The droids were telling me to abort. I don't know.
There we go. I got it.
So there are some grand lodges that do allow for multiple ritual. So where I'm from in Alberta, we're allowed 2 different rituals that we can use. British Columbia has 5 different rituals that they can use, which is interesting because one of the ones that they allow is what they call the American ritual. So kind of ask the origin of that one, knowing that
Which state? Yeah.
knowing that states are all different, the reply was basically, well, what
Which
happened
one?
is a bunch of Americans had come together to form a lodge. They were told, okay, submit a sample of the ritual that you want to use. And they literally cobbled it together based on the pieces that they remembered from their particular jurisdictions and just called it the Americans. When you actually sit down, you start watching it break down, you'll see, okay, I've seen that in California. I've seen that in Texas. I've seen that in different parts. It's kind of, you know, a unique way that that happened. But like I said, they allow for multiple rituals. So it is very interesting when you attend lodges there because you will see some very distinct differences. They also have 2 lodges that operate under the Australian ritual, which was a very similar idea, got cobbled together by a bunch of guys from Australia.
That's awesome, brother. Yeah, and what's funny is like, so there's precedent for it, not only just like in Canada, but also England, like multiple places in the world, even Australia, they allow this stuff. So it's everybody in the world but America they can run whatever ritual they want. And well, no, Joe has an interjection.
Yes, and I think you've been to lodge in DC.
Yes.
But the District of Columbia does allow other rituals. They do emulation ritual there. They have some lodges that do ritual in French and Spanish and things like that. So
The District of Columbia is the District of Awesome.
The District of Awesome, and that's why I'm in fact, they do the quote unquote red degrees once in a while that Michael Pohl talks about all the time.
Nice.
But DC is definitely a more local place to see different stuff.
They do red degrees sometimes in New Orleans, Louisiana as well.
Just a couple times.
Yeah, there's 9 lodges in New Orleans, in Louisiana, that do the red degrees.
No, it's super cool stuff. Honestly, like, I mean, if there's anyone that like ever gets to a Grand Lodge position, be a rebel and go ahead and open it up. And like one of the things I'm doing is like I did what's the philosophical Scottish Rite. It turns out that their craft ritual they use in there is really close to the ancient accepted Scottish Rite ritual, and in fact, it's the parent for what they use like in Europe. They use it today, and even though it's changed, this one's from like 1788. It's pure ritual, and so I'm publishing it through Westphalia Press, and it's going to be a pure English translation of the ritual. It'll have side by side, interlinear French with it. And so what we can do with it is it can serve as a standard form because it's originally a Scottish Rite craft ritual, but it's a dead system, not practiced anymore. It'd be really interesting to look at and read it because what it'll do, it being that French form, it's super explicit. And what's funny is we can actually reverse engineer it. If we took that same type of ritual and ran it in reverse, because it's so explicit, we've got no living memory really in any of the English-speaking countries, except for people like me and a handful of other people that travel around, but no real working memory of how these rituals work anymore. And these things are perfect for it. So for the very thing they were used for, to transplant Masonry into Europe in the beginning, we can turn back and use the exact same thing again and use it to retransplant this form of ritual back in English-speaking lodges, right? And the thing is, the idea is it doesn't supplant Grand Lodge rituals or standard Grand Lodge rituals. All it's doing is we're giving one more flavor of ice cream at the store, right? So today, you Joe Martinez over there, I see you looking. You can get your Masonic ice cream with some sprinkles on it, a little whatever you want.
Just as a note, if anybody ever has the opportunity to travel to Trinidad and Tobago, specifically Trinidad, one of the most impressive ritual degree work that I've seen is one particular lodge under the grand jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, under the Provincial Grand Lodge of Trinidad, Tobago, and Turks and Caicos, is the entered apprentice degree that's done at specifically Lodge United Brothers, which is under it's a Scottish Constitution Lodge. They are the only, from what I was told by the Right Worshipful Master of that lodge, is they're the only constituent lodge under the Grand Lodge of Scotland that can perform the first degree ritual in the way that they do it. And it's impressive.
Okay.
All right, brothers, any other questions? Brother
Es
Joe.
más preguntas para mí, señores.
Brother Joe, thank you so much for this. We really enjoyed it. And I think all the other brothers looking at the comments on here on Zoom and on Facebook Live, it seems to be very well received. And I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching the presentation because it was just so jam-packed full of great information. It's incredible research.
Well, thanks, brother. Unfortunately, like my style is like massive, like dense, like things. Like in maybe I could try and break them out more. Like in my dad, like he makes fun of me. He goes, "Your writing style is super dense." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you take all this information and like you jam it in." Like he goes, "You could have taken that one page and made it like 5 or 6 pages, but you just like super condensed it." And the thing is like because like there's so much information to cover, I don't really know a good format to do it, and I really don't like writing 900-page books. So that's where I'm going with. I just do like super dense information, make up for like knowledge gaps, and just so that way like you don't have to assume anything. Like you can kind of get that little chunk and move on, and then get the general concept.
Do your children get Masonic history for bedtime stories?
No, that would definitely put them to sleep. My son's really interested, and then my youngest son, who's 2 now, I don't know what he's interested in other than like kid stuff. But the older one, he wants to do it, and I think maybe when he hits, probably 18's too young. But when he gets in his 20s, probably he'll be ready. But until then, and that's what I told him too. I was like, when I'm dead, you got to pick up where I left off. So get to learning.
All of my kids and grandkids were hypnotized when they were little, so I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
The seeds were planted. I have a bunch of widow sons under 18 that will be here one day.
Nice. I'm done, yes. I heard, Daddy, outside the door.
You're being summoned.
I am.
Ready for
Good
the
kind of
bedtime.
summons. Thanks, Joseph.
Well, thanks, guys, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Take care now.
You too. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Matt. Be safe out there.
Okay, you too.